Sir John Hayes is the MP who is sitting in the seat that I knew when I was a child. He's the MP who would have been my MP had I remained living in Spalding. He's the MP for South Holland and the Deepings, and he said that it was virtuous and just for the United Kingdom to pass legislation for the illegal immigration bill, which Joanna Cherry, KC MP, in March 2023 said very clearly was in breach of our international obligations. These are obligations that we freely signed up to. We made a choice to undertake to protect the child, to protect the international waters, to protect refugees. And we are deciding, we are putting forward legislation which burrows under that obligation that we entered into. And she points out that we would be much more honest if we simply quit those obligations, if we quit the European Court of Human Rights, if we quit all those, the 1951 Refugee Convention and so on. She says that isn't something that her party and she in Scotland would assent to, and if the United Kingdom were to pass such legislation and were to quit these things, then it would make Scotland's independence and accession back into Europe so much easier. But that is the way we're going. She spoke a couple of times, and here's a bit of her speech in response to Suella Braverman's law back from March, and it's striking. And she's a very, very good speaker.
Joanna Cherry.
Mr Speaker, as Chair of the Joint Committee on Human Rights, I'm going to focus my comments on aspects in which this bill potentially breaches the European Convention on Human Rights.
This is an MP who is proud to call herself a lefty lawyer, and she points out a little later that she recognises that most lawyers are actually not lefties. However, most lawyers have, in contrast to Suella Braverman and the people who proposed this particular bill, respect for the rule of law and for legal obligations freely entered into. That's what she said. Nobody took the hand of the United Kingdom and forced it to sign the convention about the European Court of Human Rights, about the European Convention on Human Rights. We did so freely of our own volition. I repeat that if Conservative members do not like the obligations any longer, because they occasionally throw up results they do not like, they should have the courage of their convictions and leave the convention. Brilliant line.
The Home Secretary tries to pretend there's something unusual about these orders, but any undergraduate law student knows that for a legal system to be effective, courts must be able to issue interim orders requiring parties to take or not to take certain steps while the full arguments in a case are litigated. In Scotland, they're called interim interdicts, in England, interim injunctions, and I'm sure the Home Secretary must have heard of them. Such orders are issued by the Strasbourg Court to prevent irreparable damage to human rights while a case is being considered. It was interim orders from the Strasbourg Court that stopped Russia executing British soldiers Sean Pinner and Aidan Aslan. And talking of Russia, Mr Speaker, many of the provisions in this bill echo legislation passed by Russia in 2015 limiting the availability and applicability of ECHR rights. And we all know what happened to Russia's membership of the Convention. Is that really the sort of bedfellow that the UK wants? Turning to Scotland, we want no part of this. The Convention is written into the Scotland Act, embodying the devolved settlement, which is the settled will of the Scottish people. If the UK takes us out of the ECHR, it will be without the consent of Scottish voters and without the consent of our Parliament.
The MP points out that she'd received some letters from a primary school, and she says that these letters point out it's only a tiny fraction of refugees who come to the United Kingdom looking for our help. Only a tiny fraction. She says that she thinks that the young people who'd written to her were saying that we have a moral obligation to this tiny group of people. I think they're also making the point that human rights are universal. The government should remember that. The bill that Suella Braverman has put out tries to carve out certain categories of people for whom human rights will not be applicable in the same way as they are to us, to the MP, to me, to her constituents. It's simply wrong. And we need to do more to focus on the legal structure of Suella Braverman's bill. This lady is doing so.